club on there. Welcome to our speaker November's AMA with Ana Zepeda. She is from UC Davis. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, yeah, I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to talk to everyone and just yeah, share with you all my experience. Um, do you want me to just start off?
Yeah, if you would please just give us a little bit information of your career journey and your experience working with the different fields that you have specialized in and where you are, and just any advice as well you would like to share out because that's wonderful.
Yeah, of course. So I went to Chico State. I got my undergrad there. I was born and raised in Chico, so I went elementary, middle, high school, Chico State. And I was a major in agricultural business. And I kind of came to that decision because I knew a lot of what I didn't want to pursue. I was like, I don't like medicine. I don't like blood. Just I'm like, I don't think I'd be a good lawyer. So just like all of these careers. And I was like, well, everyone has to eat, I don't know. Like I'll figure it out from here. And I think like my second semester that I was a freshman at Chico State, I took a Latin American studies class and we were learning about how global policies like affected farmers in I think like Mexico. And I thought it was interesting because at the same exact time in the College of Ag, I was taking a class on like trade, agricultural trade. And it was just really interesting how we were like, it was the same topics, but in very distinct fields of study. And my family's from Mexico and I just was like, oh, I want to like learn more, So I took more Latin American studies class and then I was a double major in that. And then I think when I was like a junior, I did the HAKU internship in Washington, D.C., where I interned at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in D.C. And that was good because I had never had a job, like a job. Like I had worked retail while I was in college. And when I was there, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to work and I don't know, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. It was a really great experience because I was like, I don't know if I want to work at in policy, because I was working with the National Organic Program, and they were doing a lot of policy things. And I kind of thought maybe I'll go to grad school, but I really didn't know what that was. I remember, I think I was a junior and I went to a professor's office hours and I said, I think I want to go to grad school, but I don't know what I have to do. And then he basically coached me through what I had to do. And he was like, I think you're a little late. And so you're going to have to go a year later. And because I had missed the exam date for the GRE or something. And around the same exact time, I started working at Chico State, at the Center for Economic Development. It's part of the research building. It's in downtown. And I was working on some of their agriculture projects. And so that also just kind of, I wasn't working in retail anymore. So I was kind of using what I had learned. And I really liked that part of, working with data. We were working mostly with quantitative data, specifically from the census or from USDA data to, learn about what was going on with local farmers. And I thought oh, this is cool. I was like, this is research. This is interesting. And I applied at the same exact time and I got into the master's program at UC Davis, the International Agricultural Development, because I was still interested in geographically in Latin America. And then I did my master's here. My project was around how Hurricane Maria impacted women farmers in San Juan, Puerto Rico, because it was I think I did my project 2 years after Hurricane Maria ended, and I wanted to know. It was kind of informed from the data point that's always talked about is that Puerto Rico imports 90% of their food, And then after Hurricane Maria impacted the island, a lot of the ports were destroyed, and the air the airport wasn't open. So just like, what does that mean for food security in an area where they don't necessarily have they're importing a lot and they don't have a lot of local production. And I specifically focus on women just because women farmers are like not necessarily always there's a lot of biases, like people like don't think that women are farmers, but they are. So just like I kind of focus on that. And then after I did my research, I was like, I think I still want to learn more about gender and agriculture and how climate change affects farmers, specifically women farmers. So I applied for a PhD at UC Davis, and now I'm 3 years in and still doing that work. Yeah, I started the program like in 2020. So this is like actually like my first year like on campus because of the pandemic. So that has been really interesting. And so during my time at UC Davis, I worked as a teaching assistant. So working, helping professors with different classes. So anything from like agricultural development to gender studies. Right now I'm a teaching assistant for a qualitative research methods class. And I also am a graduate student researcher at the One Health Institute, which is essentially like an approach about how animal health, plant health, and human health are all linked together. And I specifically work with the gender team on how to train the next generation of professionals about how they can be inclusive to gender in their projects. Yeah, I think that's it, mostly where I've been.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to open it up. If anyone feels, you can feel free to type in your questions into the chat. You can also unmute yourself and we can go from there. So I'll do my pause for wait time. All right, I do have one question for you. You talked about your internship at DC. Can you give a little bit more information about how you got connected and knowing about that? And what was your experience with the internship? How was it different from like retail? And like, what were the big changes? Because that's a big career move. And a lot of them are, a lot of people are looking into stuff like that.
I actually learned that from a professor at Chico State, Dr. Lewis, in the history department. He had like a previous student that worked with it's HACU, which is like Hispanic American College University programs. And he was in charge of like recruiting participants from California. And so he told me like, hey, email my student. He does this. I think you'd be a good fit for it because they place you in the U.S. Department of Health, U.S. Department of the Treasury, all of these like federal government programs. And essentially, like once I applied, and I was an agriculture person, so I got to go to the agriculture department. I met like one of my closest friends there, and she was an econ major, and she worked with the Department of Health, or no, NIH, in doing some sort of data stuff. She's a quantitative data person. And so yeah, it was mostly because of my professor. And so like even now, like I tell my students, like you should go to office hours, like you're supposed to. And so like I learned through that opportunity through office hours. And so I tell my students like go to office hours, like just a couple of times if you have questions, if you just want to talk, like something good will come out of it probably. And it was so different because I was living in DC. I had never lived in a city like of that size. The internship sets you up with like an apartment, and like you get roommates because there's a bunch of students that are interning in DC during the summer. It's a 2 or 3 month internship. And you're working Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That was one big thing. I was working retail and I was only working part-time. So that was a huge like shift to like my schedule. And I feel like you're just like using a different part of your brain, like not to like the stuff that I was doing in retail, like I felt used a different part of my brain, but it was like analyzing, like reading documents and figuring out what you have to do with them. And also like, um, they kind of like, kind of like, they start you off small with your projects, and then your projects get like a little bit more intense, and just trying to figure out how to like manage your time, to make sure that you deliver it on, because you have like you're going to be gone in 2 months, so you kind of do want to do something that is impactful. um and it was also like a really good like networking opportunity, because they would have like lunches for us, and we'd meet different people from like different parts of like the federal government. We would go on like field trips to like, I think I went to the White House, and I went to like the botanical gardens. So it was just like, it was a just like a networking experience was also great. And then it also helped me realize I didn't want to work in policy. I was like, this is a lot of reading. And I mean, I'm in grad school now, which is also reading, but I was just like, I don't like legal jargon, I guess. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that they still do the internships, and I would definitely recommend it for folks to like, submit an application. Like I met some of my really good friends, and I definitely think, oh, and that was also the place where like I met a lot of kids that were going to grad school, and that was not something that I had considered before. And I was like, okay, like maybe I can do this. I don't really know what it is. So yeah, it was also kind of like what led me to where I am today.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. We have a few questions in the chat. One says, can you talk a little about your current research and any barriers you've encountered?
Yeah, so my current research is still kind of on the agriculture and then gender and disasters. But I'm going to do my PhD research in Mexico. And I think COVID has also impacted, thinking about COVID as a disaster, like an event that really impacts us all in different ways, and how people couldn't go to the grocery stores, or like many farmers weren't connected to markets, right? So I'm going to be working with a group of women that essentially started like a community kitchen in their community, and they want to start like an urban garden, but they don't know how, / they don't have funding with it. So I'm going to be working with them about figuring out what those next steps are. And then also thinking about how they can prepare, because the area in Mexico where it is, they get a lot of hurricanes and a lot of heavy rain. So how they can prepare to not, lose a lot of their crops, or, just like not be as heavily impacted when that might happen. And so yeah, was that the question? Oh, and any challenges I might have encountered. In graduate school, you always have to apply for funding to do your projects. And sometimes you submit applications and you don't get your funding. And so especially if you like have to travel, like, you're really dependent on that money. Or I know a lot of students like will pay for data, like need money to pay for like data sets, or I don't, just like things like that, pay for programs that they need to process the data. So I think kind of, just submitting applications and like not hearing back, and like, having to wait until you do get that funding, it takes a lot of patience. And then, I mean, I'm lucky that my advisor like has some like money in her like academic accounts where she can like help us, but it's always nice to just kind of have a little extra funding. And I think that also just like figuring out what you want your research to be can be very overwhelming, because there might be a lot of things that are interesting to you, but figuring out, like what you can do in a reasonable amount of time. Sometimes like your projects get so big and you're like, wait, I need to like tailor this down, or you might not even know where to start. So just, I think sometimes you get like overwhelmed with so much information, and it can almost like make you like paralyzed.
Oh, that is so true.
Yeah.
The next question would be, what skills do you wish you had before getting into a PhD program or assistantship? And then how can one work with those skills as an agricultural science major?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish that I had known more like computer like programs, like or just like any other programs like at all, like and like GIS. Like I think that that would be such a like interesting thing to know. I don't know it, like I don't know how to do it, and I know that there's a really good geography program at Chico State. I knew a little bit about how to use Excel, but not a lot because I use that a lot at the Center for Economic Development. But I definitely think that that was really good for me to learn, because then when I had to learn R, it's not the same at all. But I'm like, okay, I have to, there's some like functions that I could kind of compare to one another. Like I just think that like knowing some of that would have just been really helpful. And I know that it is used in like the private sector a lot for them to process their data when they're doing like comparing, yields and stuff for different crops. So I definitely wish I would have learned more of that. I don't know if I don't know if Chico State has classes, but I know that there's also like online you can learn some of these like R Studio and I forgot what the other one is. Starts with an S. Oh, Stata. Yeah, so I wish I would have learned that. I think, yeah, I think that that's the biggest one. And I think that it's super useful in agriculture because a lot of the data that we collect is quantitative, and just like learning how to like analyze and like synthesize that into something that means, something to your boss, your employee, like, just to anyone is really important.
Thank you. Robin actually does community coding in R here at Chico State. So we do have
Oh,
it
awesome.
now. Yes, yes. Next question would be, could you explain what a day in your life at work is like?
Yeah, so my days are super different because every day is just really different. But like like my typical day is that I go to campus and I have office hours for the class that I'm a teaching assistant for. And then after that, I go to the class that the professor teaches, and I just sit in to make sure that when I go to discussion sections, I hit on the main pieces that are important for that week. And then usually after class, I have like a break for lunch, and then I have a meeting or two with my graduate student research position with the One Health Institute here on campus. Because we work with teams in Southeast Asia and Africa, sometimes I'll have meetings at 7 a.m. to accommodate for the Africa team. And then sometimes I have meetings at like 7 p.m. to work with the Southeast Asian team. And then, so I usually have, one or two meetings that are for that. And then once a week, I have a meeting with my entire research group where we all meet up just to keep up tabs on where we are with our research. And then once a week, I have a meeting with my advisor where she just kind of likes to keep tabs on all of her students, what we're doing, making sure we're making progress in our research, and I try to make time to work on my own personal projects, at least like for 30 minutes a day. Sometimes that gets lost in, everything. So I try to work on my own stuff for at least like 30 minutes. Yeah, and I also like do grading and emails from students from, anything in between. So it's a lot of that, and mixed up, and different days I might have meetings in the beginning and end up with like email. So it's all like the same components.
Busy, busy. Next one is, oh, Stephanie, did you have your hand? You can go ahead.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, Anna, I was a first generation student, and when you were talking about talking to people in a master's program or in a grad program, and you're like, wow, they're doing it, I could do this. I just remember as an undergrad just being so focused on the courses and just getting through. And then when someone said grad school, I was like, what is that? I didn't even understand what that meant. And I wondered if you have any advice for the students on this call about that piece and what that can mean for you professionally moving down, your
Yeah.
career.
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't know what grad school was, and because my degree was so interdisciplinary, like, and I kind of felt like I had an option just to go into like the corporate world, to work in the business part of my degree. But I knew I didn't really want to do that. Um, but I knew that I was really interested in agriculture and Latin America, and I wanted to get more like develop that further, make that a stronger knowledge base for myself. So the programs I applied to were kind of had emphasis kind of like on like global agricultural production. And so my thinking was when I applied to the master's was like, well, maybe I can get a job, being a focus, like maybe being like a work, being like a company's like main person on Latin America. I had no idea when I initially applied. And then when I got to like the midway point of my master's, I realized that I still wanted to continue studying what I was studying because I wanted to either be like focused solely on research and work with like a research institution, or maybe even work for like an NGO. I still don't know. But I also realized that as a teaching assistant, I also really enjoyed teaching and like interacting with my students. So I was like, I'm now on my PhD, I'm kind of like, I'm fine if I go like the research route, or I'm fine if I go the teaching route, because I really do enjoy both of them. And I think as a first gen student, like I said, I had no idea that like what graduate school was, right? I had no idea what that process was like. But it kind of just took me just being like, okay, well, I'm going to figure it out as I go down this road, and like, I had a really great professor who kind of like helped me throughout the way. And so like, I would encourage students that if they have like a professor that they really like, have a good connection with, to maybe reach out to them, because they'll probably know of good programs for you too. Like I remember my professor said like, apply to these programs, or like look into these programs. So they will have like good insight for you.
And that you don't have to get your master's first. That was, I knew quite a few graduate students who thought, oh, I have to get my master's first before PhD. And that's absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're just adding on a lot of years in depending on what you end up wanting to do. But
exactly.
Super true. Speaking about PhD programs and all that, our next question actually is about applying to PhD programs. Like, was it a stressful process for you? And would you have any advice or tips about applying?
Yeah, it is a kind of a stressful process because you have to juggle so many different applications and figuring out, like where you want to go. I mean, because like in my case, I knew that Chico State didn't have a master's program. And so I was looking at, I was like looking specifically at schools that had like agriculture programs, but also that were like social sciencey. And then I also had to think about geography. Like I was like, I don't really want to go into the cold part of the United States, and I didn't want to go outside of the United States. And so I applied to different programs, like kind of like in the Southwest and in California. So that's like, I think geography is an important thing to take into account. Like, where do you see yourself living for a PhD 4 years out of the 4 years of your life? And I think like starting early and just kind of having a list of programs that you want to apply to. Like I had an Excel sheet where I had like Arizona State, Texas A&M, UC Davis, Cal Poly. I had that list when I applied for my master's. And I had like what I needed, like the application, an essay about this, and I had like certain letters of recommendations. And as I filled out those applications, like making sure that I was also keeping tabs if my letters of recommendations were in. And just like setting time aside, like during the week to work on that. When I was writing my essays, I went to the writing center at Chico State a couple of times just to get help with that, because it's always good to have like an extra set of eyes on your writing material. And I also asked like my professors to help me with like my essays. Yeah. And I have like a student who's going through the process right now. She's applying to PhD programs, and like she's like, yeah, like it's the same process, she's like, I'm kind of doing the same thing. So it can be a stressful time, but it's also exciting because you're like, thinking about, what the future might hold. It also can be anxious, but I try to, look at it through the positive.
Thank you. So our next question is, what careers do you think will open up for you as a postdoctorate grad?
Hopefully a lot. I hopefully would like to go, like I said, I would like to like maybe work at a university as like a professor, or leading research at like a like at an organization, like a research and like the Brookings Institute. I forgot what we call those, like a I'm blanking on the name, but like these big like kind of like NGOs that conduct business research. I think that would be really interesting. I know that a lot of people now that have PhDs are kind of going into the private industry. I don't necessarily know what that looks like, but I think because I kind of do have a background in working with data, specifically qualitative data, that is something that like that's like a skill that I could use there. Yeah, but I don't know. I'm really, like I said, I'm really open to any sort of career. So yeah.
Awesome. So a follow-up for applying for PhD programs, there are a lot that are competitive. So any advice about how to make yourself stand out maybe when you're applying for any of those programs in geography? Any tips?
Yeah, I think that you should apply to the programs even if they are competitive. You never know who's applying. You don't know if you're the strongest applicant that year. So definitely, apply. I think that if you want to have it, like, I think if you want to have a strong application, it's also like all in the details, right? So like if you're applying to like a school that has an emphasis like in a certain thing, like at UC Davis, like it's a agriculture school. We have a lot of different crops, here. I would, like maybe in your application material say, like something that's like really specific to that university or that program that you're applying to, about like the work that they do and how like their students like do their research projects. Just so they like maybe can even picture you in, that university in that program. I didn't do this, but I wish I would have done it, is to like reach out to advisors before I applied to the schools. I just applied. And when I was like a second year, I realized that people had actually reached out to their advisors before they applied. So yeah, like if there's someone's work that you think that could really aligns with what you're interested in, or like, they could really guide you through your research. I would encourage you to like send them an email. It can be really scary, but I would definitely encourage you to do that, just so that even if you don't apply to that university, maybe it's a connection that you have. If you're like in a different university, you can be like, oh yeah, remember when I emailed you and I was applying to your program? I'm still doing similar research, and they might be interested in what you're doing. So yeah, I mean, it's I'm sure that like it's like I said, it's just kind of all in the details.
That's really good advice. I love that reaching out piece and everything. That's a key piece, because a lot of people, when they apply to grad programs, they don't realize that who the faculty are and what their research is. If you don't have aligned interests, maybe that's not the best fit. But seeing what they have out there and who you can get as a mentor is really, really important. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, I wish I would have done that. I didn't. And like sometimes like you might not hear back from them, just like keep following up. Like their inboxes are full, so like just keep following up.
Yes. Our next question is, What do you love about your current like role and research?
Yeah. I think that when I'm a teaching assistant, I really like seeing like the students applying what they're learning to something that they're passionate about. So right now in the qualitative research methods class, they're getting to a point where like they've designed like their research project, you know, how they're going to collect data, all this stuff. And now we're getting to a point where they're going to start collecting data. And it's really interesting because they've all developed research topics on things that they find interesting. So I have like students doing stuff from like first year students experiences at UC Davis all the way to uh like having a pet and like mental health or something like that, like super diverse projects. But like it's been interesting seeing them like, you know, like form this like passion for it and applying what we're learning in class to something that is meaningful to them. And then also just like learning from my students, like I, you know, every quarter like I learn new words and, you know, I learn new things from them. So it's I really like that. And I really like from like my, you know, from like my research point is just kind of like seeing like these very vague ideas in my brain kind of result in something, you know, like in a project or like a project proposal or something. Just because sometimes they start in your head where you're like, you know, you maybe connect, you kind of like make some connections in your head, but you're like, okay, what does this mean in the actual real world? And then so, you know, making that connection somewhere and applying it, you know, outside in a real world setting, I think is really enriching to me.
Thank you. You had talked about your research with your Hurricane Maria and learning about that. Can you give a little bit more insight into the process of your research of collecting data, or what you did around that project?
Yeah. So for that project, I wanted to just kind of understand like the importance of urban gardens for the communities that they're in, but also how they were affected after Hurricane Maria. And so I was in Puerto Rico for about a month. And I had previously connected with a professor who did research on urban agriculture in Puerto Rico, but not necessarily focusing on gender. So she was really happy to connect me with women urban farmers. So when I got to Puerto Rico, I had a list of women urban farmers, but she did her like big survey and research before Hurricane Maria. So when I went 2 years afterwards, a lot of them had actually weren't living on the island anymore. They had migrated out. So when I got there, I was like working with a smaller sample size. I think I interviewed 8 or 9 women, which is a lot less than what we're used to in quantitative research. You know, in quantitative research, you have like sample sizes of like hundreds and thousands. But in qualitative research, I think that it's fairly common to have smaller sample sizes. And it was also, I was only there for a month, you know, so I was kind of limited with time. And I did semi-structured interviews. So I had, I think, 4 or 5 questions that were like really broad, where I asked them about, you know, like the urban agriculture, like the garden, about it. And then I had one that was like about the disaster. And then we talked a lot about like food security as well. And then after that, we did a transect walk, which is it's like a participatory methodology where you just kind of walk around the area of interest in your research. So we did a transect walk around the urban garden area. And that was really interesting to complement the interviews, because they would bring up stuff that we hadn't originally talked about in the interview. So like they'd be like, oh yeah, like, you know, this is where like I first planted like plantains, but they didn't really come out, and I figured out that the soil here wasn't good. So then I did this and this and this. So it was just interesting because it brought up new like, you know, information. And then once I recorded all of my interviews, they were anywhere from like 30 minutes to like over an hour. And then you transcribe them. So you listen to them and you type them up. And then I coded them using In Vivo, which is the qualitative data software that we use in my lab. And that took me a while because I'm a slow typer. And then I also had all of my interviews were in Spanish. So then I transcribed them in Spanish. And when I coded them, I also coded them in Spanish just because it's easier for like my brain to just be in one language setting. Yeah. And then so just kind and then like I just kind of like when I was reading my transcripts, thinking about how those what came out of those questions like went with or like illuminated my more entire like research question. Yeah, so it was a process.
Awesome. Next question is, do you see yourself continuing doing the same or similar research topic with women farmers after your PhD, or is there another research interest you'd like to pursue?
I see myself still continuing along the same topic area. Yeah, I think that gender will always be like a core part of my research. Yeah, I think that right now, like especially like in agricultural development, there's a lot of like the new like thing is thinking about how to like engage men more so that they don't always have like the same gender biases with the women in their lives. So it's like a new thing. So maybe I could see myself kind of engaging with that a little bit more, but I like what I do right now. I don't know if in the future something else will like be super interesting to me. I don't know.
Yeah, keeping your doors open is always good.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Did you scan that document thing that I showed, that flyer page?
sorry.
Okay.
All right. So you had talked about wanting experience with R. That would have been a good type of course to have. Were there any other courses you would recommend or wish you would have taken besides that?
Yeah. I really liked in the agricultural business program, we have like a capstone class where it's a writing intensive and you write like 4 or 5 essays in the semester. And it's actually pretty rigorous, but I think it really helped me with my writing skills, like because I write a lot now, but it just helped me kind of like form a thesis and write a research paper. And so even though it was very intense, I really liked that class. And I would recommend it to students. I would recommend like some sort of like writing intensive course that is like, like in part of your like program or like complements your program. I think I wish I would have taken like more like some of the plant biology classes, because we had a requirement. We had to take like at least 2 plant classes and 2 animal science classes. But maybe I wish I would have taken at least like one more like plant science class just to like, because I know a lot of like the basics, but maybe just to like know a little bit more. And like I said, I wish I would have learned R, like or some sort of like computer programming stuff for sure. And I wish I would have I really do wish I would have taken a GIS course, because I think that that's like so cool and like really useful for like anything. There's a lot of people in my program that know how to do it and they do it really well and they are able to apply it in like all areas of the world. Like, yeah, I think that, I think that Chico State has like a certificate program for the GIS. I don't know, but one of my former bosses at the Center for Economic Development is a geography lecturer at Chico State. And so he's always talking about, like GIS, and I really do wish I would have learned that.
Was that Peter Hansen?
No, Peter worked there while I was there, but it's Ryan Miller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate you sharing all of your experience and giving advice. Folks, I am going to drop into the chat the post survey, and I'm going to turn off my video, and there's the QR code you could also scan to be able to do it. And if you want to ask any more questions, you could do so or start doing your post surveys. Thank you so much again, Anna.
Yeah, thank you so much. Also, I can share my email if anyone wants to.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Let me change my spotlight, my thing here. Okay, that works.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, like it was great talking.
Yes, I will be in touch with you. I'll be sending you a follow-up email just thanking you and getting everything straightened out at the end. So appreciate it so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have
Bye.
a good one.
So much.
Bye.
It's so wonderful hearing from you.
Yeah.
Good
thank
luck on your research. And if you're ever in Chico, come up
Yes.
and say hi.
you. Of course. Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye. I should stop recording.